we are getting ready to do a tour of the City of Stafford to highlight some of the places that have followed very well our zoning ordinance and some places that have not followed so well our zoning ordinance. So that's going to include vacant buildings, pre-existing non-conforming sites, and things of that nature, especially really things that I want the board and the council to pay special attention to as we look forward to updating the comprehensive plan. Okay, so the plan for today is for us to maybe start at the old Weatherford farm site, which is now called Weatherford. Go to Houston Fence to talk about that property, go to the what's known as the Botts property, then come up Murphy, visit the grid, come across 59 to visit the fountain, visit also the new housing development that's in the area, come all the way down, and then also come through 90, stop at the at Regal Ranch, and then stop at the new retail development, and then finally ending here to highlight the Island District. Okay, so first stop is the Stafford Center and in general the Arts and Education District. So what I really wanted to highlight here is all this vacant land over here and on the other side of the street right there. So on that side of the street, that's city-owned property, and this is Houston Community College property. Over there, down that way, when you're at that intersection, that's essentially the end of the Arts and Education District, and you get into the RCT District. So this part of the city was highlighted as a site for redevelopment and also more specifically for transit-oriented development. So the idea was that this back end over there where we see a lot of existing buildings, that was going to get redeveloped into a transit stop near the rail.
Like Metro Rail?
Yeah, exactly. The idea was to have light rail go all the way down from the medical center where it currently terminates to come all the way down, and the idea was that this vacant property was going to give the opportunity for densification and transit-oriented development. So that's the first site I wanted to start at, because this area was really highlighted in the plan as an opportunity area. So I wanted to have more visual for people so they understand the vacant land that we are working with, because I think throughout the talks I'd been highlighting a lot about how we're only, we're 97% developed, while we still have a lot of great opportunities, and more specifically we have city-owned property where there's potential. Interesting property right there. Looks like that some of these are zoned primary corridor when they're not on the primary corridor. What?
When did that happen?
When did what happen?
Get out! Oh my! We're going over there. We're going to take pictures.
What happened?
Oh my!
The demo?
Stallman's. It's going down.
Yeah.
Oh my!
I can explain.
Oh.
So do we want to go there now?
Yes, I got to turn around. You don't understand. That's 15 years of looking at that crappy building. Oh my goodness. It's a pivotal day in Stafford. Oh, what's up here? What? Oh, wait a minute.
What?
Why do I have action going on a property that doesn't have a CO? Tatyana?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Sorry, we're switching into code enforcement. Wait a minute. What do I have here? Sorry, gotta put the other hat on, guys. What's this?
Okay. This is something that happens a lot when you're in this car with Scott. As a code enforcement person, he's always looking for unusual activity that's happening in the city. So for this building, it is a building that we know is vacant, And so he saw a truck and things like that. So he is thinking that someone is in here without, or operating without, a certificate of occupancy. And so when a business is operating here in the city of Stafford, they're supposed to come to the city for an occupancy permit.
Go in there.
Doors open.
It's an invitation.
Oh, I'm seeing a nice old portion there.
Now this very well could be from the owner of the property.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of vehicles.
I'm seeing work going on.
No, one of the challenges is this is considered an industrial site, and the primary corridor is not zoned industrial. So I've gotten multiple calls about this site for wanting to occupy it.
This man just took a twist.
For industrial purposes. So after I tell people no a certain amount of time, what they'll do is just oftentimes start operating without.
These guys said they've been in here for a long time. Now this tells me, because that old man stuff is still in here, is that the old man who owns this property is here. So this may be legitimate use. Because see, I'm seeing the old trucks and stuff, and that's the old man's MO that owns this place. He's got some really cool old cars. I'm going to ease up in here and go talk to the guy that owns that blue truck, because he's from Needville and I know him.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's good to know. Apparently Houston Fence was sold off, and American Wall Systems was operating here at the same time that Houston Fence was operating here. They sold off that part of the business, Houston Fence, and American Wall Systems is still operating here as of today. So this is no longer a vacant site. The original owner is still operating in some shape, form, or fashion. So I guess we move on to the next property.
Okay, well that's good to know.
Boy, so yeah.
But this highlights one of the good reasons why we should have a vacant building ordinance.
Or when a business leaves, they need to tell us.
Tell us. Yeah. Okay. So we are making a detour because we want to look at a non-compliant structure going down. Yeah, they pulled a permit. And why they needed to demo it was in order to do the plat, to record the property and build the new buildings they wanted. They had to take everything down because the proposed property lines they were showing
were crossed with buildings.
Exactly. So
they mowed my yard over there too. Today is just a
beautiful
happy day for Scott. You just don't realize what's going on right here for me at this moment.
Okay, so we are at the old Stallman Site. So way back in the day, this was they did wood, right?
Yeah, this was a lumber yard.
This was a lumber yard, and then it got taken over by Habitat for Humanity Restore, and essentially was working as a retail shop. I mean, it was, but the building was really old and non-compliant, and they had outdoor storage, which is not allowed here in the city or in this corridor. So outdoor storage is essentially storing your stuff outdoors. So this got bought up by a lighting company, and they actually rezoned this property and the vacant property behind us in order to build office warehousing and distribution. So per the ordinance, the primary corridor does not allow for any warehousing nor distribution. So that's why they rezoned the property. They are looking to create, out of the 3 lots that they had, they're looking to create 2. And the structure that was here existing for the new lots they were wanting to create, they were encroaching on those property lines. So in order to create those new lots, the condition was that they had to demo the building, which is what is being done right here. Now, looking towards the front of us, this is a non-compliant use. And by non-compliant use, it's not that the building itself is out of compliance, it's that the use itself is not where it's supposed to be. So this is a pre-existing non-conforming site. With a change of ownership, this use is going away. Now, it is going away because I've talked to the owner, and as they develop the whole site, once this person's lease is over, they intend to have that person vacate so they can redevelop the site. So that is the process of redevelopment, essentially. So in this situation, as the new owner was willing to kick them out, or have their lease terminate rather than kick out, that's the most natural course for pre-existing non-conforming uses to leave. So yeah.
Perfect. Did y'all get what y'all needed over here at Houston Fence? Or?
Yeah, I think so. Well, thing is, I was going to talk about the fact that it's vacant, but it's not vacant.
It's not
so...
vacant. It's full. Okay, where we going next?
I want to stop by Weatherford Farm. Alrighty, so we are at Weatherford Farm Industrial Park. So this was, back in the day, 34 acres of the Weatherford Farm Nursery. So back in 2018, City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission approved for this whole site to be rezoned for this type of use. So there are 3 buildings, each of varying sizes, for potential tenant build-outs. So as of today, which is October 27th, there are tenants for building 3 and a tenant in building 2. But this is what it looks like. So as part of the rezoning, they highlighted the materials they were going to use here on the building, and to make sure that they were compliant with those, the building official comes out and does regular routine inspection. Also, some of the requirements that are put in place are landscaping requirements. So I kind of wanted us to look down this way for us to look at the landscaping requirements. So for pretty much every 20 spots, you are required to put some sort of landscape island. Also here on the street side, you have shrubs and street trees that are at a distance of every 30 feet. So ideally in the future, as the corridor gets developed, we will see this type of frontage instead of, you know, the frontage that we see, for example, say across the street over here, where the cars, it's hard to see with all the traffic, but all the cars are directly abutting the street. Here you have a space between the street and the actual parking lot. So this is Weatherford Farm, and I think it looks pretty good. Let's go towards the detention pond in the back. Yes, so I do want to point out that all of these buildings technically could allow for a retail use. That's how the property was rezoned, that a potential allowable uses are retail. Now, when you look at this like this, clearly, you know, these are bay doors for distribution. So how likely are we to get potential retail tenants in these buildings?
Or not?
It's hard to say. And I think, like Scott said, we're not.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, so Crow, who was responsible for the development, are responsible for a lot of industrial development across the area. So beautiful product, but the use that's coming in may not be the use that we really imagined for the primary corridor. So,
but this was allowed.
This was allowed by City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission as part of a rezoning. So I wanted us to stop, and actually this is probably a really good shot just from the car. I don't think we really need to get out. But right across the street was actually another rezoning. That rezoning was known as Duke Realty. So essentially what happened back in 2008 when we rezoned the city as part of creating the primary corridor and the island, the idea was that anything fronting Murphy would be zoned primary corridor. Now, this particular property that you see right here does not front Murphy, but it was zoned primary corridor. And I think part of the reason was that originally, way back in the day, these two properties were owned by the same person. So I think really that property across the street was erroneously zoned primary corridor. So in order to allow for new tenants to come in, they actually had to rezone the property. So across the street is a prime example of what happens when you have pre-existing non-conforming uses, tenants change, and the option is to either rezone or have those uses go away. They were able to rezone to a planned development district to allow for the same uses that they've always had in this building to continue. And it was also as a way to rectify the error that happened when the primary corridor was created. Okay, I don't know if it's worth mentioning, but this is a detention pond.
And look, we have wildlife in our detention pond.
Oh, but dang.
Ladies and gentlemen, the elusive, frivolous whistling duck.
Okay.
Pretty cool.
But yeah, ideally the long-term plan for this pond is to kind of be, I'll say a semi-regional detention facility that could work both for this 34 acres and also for the Duke Realty property.
Excellent.
So there's a big, so my next stop is actually I did want to stop by Bott's property. I kind of wanted to highlight all the non-conforming uses in the Bott's property.
So we'll make a look through?
Yeah, I think so. So we are now entering what we call at the city the Bott's property. So for a very long time this was owned by a gentleman named Jeff Bott. He sold at the end of last year in 2020, and so a new owner came in. So now at the site we have a lot of uses that are non-conforming. So
speaking of non-conforming, I gotta take a minute.
Okay, we will stop right here. Okay, so the Bott property, really this is what we could probably consider office warehouse. So a small portion of it has on the front is offices, while the remainder is warehouse. So the reason why I would call this office warehouse and not a distribution center is that really each tenant has maybe 1 to 2 bay doors. And so at this site we do have a lot of non-conforming uses. We have a lot of auto repair body shops. We also have a couple machine shops here. Those are the 2 biggest non-conforming uses. Now also in the primary corridor we don't allow for things such as open storage. So behind these fences you do see some open storage which is non-conforming to the site. However, if they've been here, we have to allow it to remain until a new tenant comes in.
Now mind you, none of the items that you see back here in the back are visible from the front of the street.
Right, correct.
And when it comes to enforcement, through code enforcement, really we enforce what we can see from the right-of-way.
Right.
So we can come through here, we can make a loop through here, we can come in here and visit with property owners, but honestly, nothing will hold up in court unless it can be seen from that right-of-way up there. Mm-hmm. And most of it is not visible from the right-of-way.
Right.
It's kind of a big area.
It's really big. I believe...
Big enough for a grocery store?
Oh, I mean, I think this is pretty much about the size as the Weatherford farm property, right, Scott? 30-some acres?
Probably so.
And,
Big piece of property.
yeah, so for example, here, Atomic CrossFit, that's actually a compliant use. This area allows for gyms. It allows for insurance. So you see insurance on this side. And things like that. So really this area is, I don't want to say hodgepodge, but it kind of is a hodgepodge of different uses. So when it comes to any sort of enforcement here, it can be a little tricky. Because the structure itself is office warehouse, which isn't really allowed in the primary corridor, but certain uses do end up finding office warehouse, the building itself, ideal for their type of business that they have. So,
Ice cream trucks are not allowed in the city of Stafford.
oh,
What?
Nope. Food trucks, ice cream trucks.
Well,
Not
but
unless
you have to have a permission.
you have to have a permit. We don't have permits for ice cream trucks. We have a permit for food trucks. It's something that we need to be revisiting again because it has some
flaws.
very
Yeah.
much so.
Yeah.
So we've got some corrections we need to make there
Yeah.
to make it easier and better for the food truck owners. Where are we going next?
The grid. Yeah. So for example, this pit stop auto repair right here, that is a pre-existing non-conforming use. So if someone wanted to come in there to take over, they wouldn't be able to. And so on our right here, after the trailer park, this is what's known as the Faila or Faya. Faila property, thank you. And so this is owned by various members of the Faila family. So this is actually a pretty decent amount of property. There's about 5 or 6 pieces, all about an acre in size, that there's been a lot of interest in combining to redevelop. Unfortunately, that hasn't really happened. Like you can see right there, it says 10 acres for sale. But in here we have a lot of non-compliant uses. The RV boat storage. Further down we had a car dealership, etc., etc. So ideally what would happen is that someone would be able to come in, probably buy all of the property, because unfortunately right now how a lot of these properties have been broken out have very small frontage and are very deep, and that's not really ideal. But if someone were able to buy all of them and combine it into a single property, you could probably do a lot here. Unfortunately, a lot of the interest that I've had is for residential, which isn't permitted in the primary corridor, or industrial distribution like what we have on our left at the grid, and unfortunately on this side of Murphy it is not allowed. Yeah, so this intersection is an intersection that was highlighted as part of the 1092 improvements. Scott mentioned, the Stafford traffic. This is one of our busiest intersections. So the 1092 plans are doing improvements. I believe we're wanting to add a second left turn lane right where we were, in order to be able to have traffic flow more easily. It's either on that end or the opposite end. I unfortunately can't quite remember. So we are arriving now at the grid on our left. So the grid is a mixed-use project, and so by mixed use we have a variety of uses. On the front facing Murphy, we have industrial. Now I want to highlight that the intention of, let's go ahead and turn here on signal. The intention of Murphy was to be a retail commercial corridor, yet when we rezoned, this piece of property, we opted for industrial on the Murphy side. Now you might say, well, that's kind of counterintuitive to what the zoning ordinance said. Well, really, I think when we rezoned that property, we intended for the industrial uses to be where the industrial uses have always been, which is on the Murphy corridor. So on our left here, we have what we call the JLB apartments. So we have 1889 and then the ARC. Those are the first two phases. They are pretty much, actually, they are completed. So I think between the two phases, that is over 600 apartments. And then on our right, we're expecting probably the fifth and final phase of the JLB apartments. And then on the front end is where phase 3 and 4 are going to be developed. So also something to highlight is the sidewalks. So here in the grid, all sidewalks are supposed to be 6 feet. So that is in order to promote walkability in the grid. So the idea that a resident in the apartments would be able to walk all the way to Costco or any of the other eateries that we have here in the grid.
But they aren't 6 feet wide, are they?
No, they are. So the ones that were publicly built are. However, some of the internal ones got defaulted to 5 feet. The 5 feet that meets our regular ordinances, but doesn't meet the grid ordinance.
This way, that way.
That way. Let's go to Costco. Also, here on our left, we're going to see the detention pond. So this is the detention pond that is covering all of the grid. So any individual sites being developed here at the grid will not require detention. Yeah, let's go ahead and go all the way down to Trinity, or to the end of Trinity. And that's partially for myself because I'm curious to how far they are.
Yep, you don't take a picture.
Okay. So
they have started it.
yes, they have started it. Trinity Drive is going to connect all the way to Blue Bonnet over the TI ditch. So the purpose of this was to allow for more north to south mobility in the city, because right now we have 59 and then Murphy, and then we didn't have much in between. So back, I believe it was in the 80s when one of the first master thoroughfare plans came out, they highlighted that they wanted more north to south mobility. Then this was also highlighted in the 1092 plan, that additional north-south mobility would be great to help alleviate some of the issues on Murphy. So this is in progress. I think they had some slight delays because of some unexpected utility conflicts, but that's really typical with roadway construction. And so they are moving right along.
Are we doing this? Or?
So this is an SCDC, Fort Bend County, and Stafford project. So,
because they grid built up to the ditch.
Exactly. Yeah, let's go ahead and move the big building.
Or I should say the future parking garage.
Yes. So the building in front of us is the old TI buildings. The intent was for these buildings to be reused. So a lot of times that's also known as adaptive reuse, which is essentially taking an old structure and rehabilitating to a new use. So I know that on this particular front portion, I believe right here, that's going to be demoed. I've been in talks with a developer about doing apartments, wrap apartments right here, and townhomes, but they'll still be multifamily as they won't be for individual sale. So a lot of the questions have come up with what we're about to come to, which is the old, was that a parking lot in the past? I don't quite know.
No, it was a manufacturing facility.
The manufacturing facility, the idea was for it to become a parking garage or also an eatery, food hall type thing. So as of right now, with street level, part of the reason why this hasn't been developed is because a lot of the uses that they wanted in this space requires daytime density. So the idea is that daytime density, it's all your office workers and businesses that would be here in the grid being able to support those types of uses here. Unfortunately, partially because of COVID and many other factors, office uses aren't in such high demand anymore. So street level isn't really seeing any daytime office demand, for example, such as a bank, as Amegy Bank here on our left. Those populations aren't currently here in the grid that would support, a big food hall, eatery, things like that in that space. So that's why, unfortunately, it hasn't been developed. But
it's not off the table yet.
It's definitely not off the table. And part of the reason why it's not off the table is because the residential side of things has done really well. So, and the idea is that, now if there's no daytime population in office because everybody's working from home, well, all those homes are now in those apartments. So it's definitely not off the table, but it hasn't moved at the pace that I think street level would have liked.
It's just sidebar conversation. I mean, you really think about it. You have, when these were all done, that's what, 2,500 apartments total right here in this area?
Yeah.
That doubled our apartment count in Stafford.
Right.
When this last one was built or gets built, that doubled our apartment count. So you've got 2,500 homes. You figure 2 person per home at a minimum. So you've got 5,000 people. They need a place to go eat. And I mean, they'll be a very big part of supporting the grid area. So now you want to go to
the fountains.
And what was this going to be across the street from? There's something going on across the street from Costco.
Yes.
What's that?
A Kelsey-Seybold Clinic. I think I can say that now that their plans are under review. Before, I wasn't able to. So it's going to be a Kelsey-Seybold Clinic.
How big?
I think 30,000 square feet. Here we're on the 59 feeder. So that's TxDOT, Texas Department of Transportation. But we do some of the maintenance. We are entering what is known as the fountains. So this is one of the few areas of the city zoned MU1. So the 1 in that zoning district is to categorize some of the height requirements that are different from the MU district. So in MU1, buildings could go up to 8 feet tall. So we could probably pull into one of these parking lots.
Okay.
I want to talk about parking lots. So really what I wanted to highlight here is the layout of the fountains. So really you got the road right here, or even we can even go further back to 59. Then we have an aisle or a huge space of parking lot to then see the retail buildings all the way in the back. So really, this is the more traditional type of development that has been present pretty much everywhere, where essentially you're wanting to accommodate traffic and cars rather than to highlight your retail space that you have. So the fountains, while a good idea as a way to bring in retail money to the city, really, unless you know about it, how do you know it's here? So really, the fountains is primed for redevelopment simply because rather than having just this sea of parking, could we have something that's more inviting for people? So really, it would be possible that instead of having all the surface parking, we could have a central parking garage and then additional buildings where the parking lot is currently taking up space and valuable real estate, to be honest, and then have some of these more retail uses towards the front where people would be able to see them and come in. So while this was not highlighted in the comprehensive plan, I think that type of redevelopment scheme should maybe be looked at to see if that is a good idea as a way to revamp this area and bring retail back in. Granted, at this time of day, are we expecting to see a lot of people in these stores? I don't quite know, but as you can tell, we're in a pretty empty parking lot. So really, that's all I wanted to highlight about the fountains, since I know it's come up a lot as it has a new owner.
It has a new owner, or
Yes.
is it still for sale?
It has a new owner. So luckily, all these uses are allowed by right. So actually, no, the main event may not be. I'll have to look into that. But yeah, essentially these types of retail spaces are dying for multiple reasons. People are shopping online now. People don't want to have to leave their home. So how do you get people to leave the home to come to these spaces? Well, ideally, it's just not a sea of retail. You have more to do here. You know, it's a stay and play kind of thing. You know, you want to be able to come here and stay for the whole afternoon, start with your shopping, eat here, maybe have a playground or park for, you know, your kids to play at. You know, have this area be more inviting rather than just a sea of parking lot. It comes again to the idea of, okay, well, how do we incentivize this type of redevelopment? Right now, the site is working in theory just fine. You know, they have tenants in here, but should they not have tenants, you know, what would they want to do? Then at that point, maybe we could start the conversation. But what are we incentivizing for them to want to put in that money? A lot of times with these sites, what we do is we'd offer to help them with their public utility infrastructure. Well, this site is already all developed. So, you know, what can we offer them in order to help them redevelop? Sometimes, a lot of times, it's tax rebates or tax incentives. Well, one of the major ones, such as city property tax, we already don't have. So, you know, what can we use to incentivize these owners to redevelop? That's one of the central questions, you know, that as a city we need to start asking. Yep. That's the fountains. Yeah, I wanted to go down Fountain Lake Drive
Make that happen.
to
The new
the new housing development, yeah. And then while I'm at it, highlight where the new the new bike trail is going.
Oh yeah, I wondered where that was.
So Carolyn, if you look to your right, you will see the future spot for the bike trail. So this is its terminus. This is the end of the trail. Yep. And it's going to go all the way down that easement, all the way down to City of Meadows Place and connect to their existing trail that they have.
When does it start? Didn't it just get approved?
It got approved, earlier this year, I think in April. And so right now they're still in the design phase of it and coordinating with Centerpoint and things like that to make sure that we are allowed in their easement. So ideally the sidewalk as well will be connected. So like that trail can connect to this park here. So on our right, we are now entering Fountain Park Village. So this is another planned development district that was approved by City Council. And so this is for a total of, I want to say 60 something houses. So where we're at right now is phase 2. This portion is going to have about 15 houses, and the majority of the houses are across the street for phase 1. So these houses are on smaller lots than what is usually permitted in a single-family residential district, and they are two stories.
And was this a special use?
Yeah, so it was rezoned. So it is now a Fountain Park Village Planned Development District. So the reason it got rezoned was to allow for the smaller lots, first off. Second, to allow for smaller setbacks in between the houses. So some of these houses have what's called zero lot lines. So essentially the houses are right next to each other.
It's kind of like a patio home,
But not. Yeah, because patio homes are attached while these houses are not. And they're all for individual sale.
have these already been selling, or?
That I don't know. I know that the City Choice Group does have this on their website. Last I checked, I didn't see any of the houses had been sold yet. But granted, the last time I was on their website was maybe 3-4 months ago. But also something important to highlight, we are on a private street, not a public street. But this private street had to be built to public works standard should something happen and we need to take over the street.
We gotta get back here and do a U-turn. We can't get out
Yes,
this way.
because that is how they wanted it. But because the fire marshal needs 2 points of entrance, that gate right here can be opened by the fire department at any time. Now I just wanted us to go down 90.
Down 90, all right. So
Yeah.
we'll go down, we'll go back here and loop.
Because I think really it's all well and dandy when we're talking about all these things theoretically from a, high level, I'm looking at aerials all day, like I don't really have a true sense of things until you're out in front of a building.
I remember when they came here, they were going to improve this thing.
Correct.
What happened?
So, as I understand, we had approved plans for renovating this space. The gentleman who owns it apparently got very sick, and that's why he wasn't able to redevelop it or put this building up to standard. So really, this whole site is not compliant for many reasons. Number one, the driveway is not an all-weather surface. The building is substandard. We also have open storage in the back, which is not allowed. And probably most importantly, this site currently has someone occupying the space with no certificate of occupancy. So
There's somebody in there?
Correct. So someone is currently storing materials in here and shipping them out. I don't quite know exactly what it is he's shipping in and out, but code enforcement has been out here. The fire marshal's office has been out here to give this person citations, but citations can only go so far. This building is still the same as it was probably, I think it was 10 years ago that you all did the original tour. This building is still in the same state. So this building, for example, could be a prime candidate for a vacant building ordinance where we would force this person to have to pay a fee for every year that this building sits the way it does. And then eventually that would encourage them to either demo the building or bring it up to compliance. Also, it is possible that this building is so substandard, we could start the condemnation process of condemning the building and then us tearing it down. But this is one of many buildings on the primary corridor that's just sitting and not doing anything for the city. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight this one because as you can tell on that door, the numbers are there. So, you know, the reason you put your numbers on there is to let people know what your address is and as such to deliver goods and materials. So I believe that though this building is substandard, doesn't meet any requirements, there is activity going on in this building. We do have Excel parts here on this end that is redeveloping. So that old building's going to come down and they're going to build a bigger building. But that's being done in phases. And across the street, so here we're at South Main Street Plaza. This is another property that got rezoned. So really this is a very interesting rezoning because they rezoned to permit the uses that would have been allowed here anyways. But really one of the reasons they did rezone was to be more creative with the space in terms of the building setbacks and the landscaping requirements. So, and the parking requirements. But all the uses that are going in here would have been allowed by right anyways. But yeah, they opted to rezone the property anyways to exclude a lot of uses.
And what's it gonna do?
So at the front here, we're going to have a gas station, but then in the back, we're going to have essentially retail office spaces. I know that the owner already has several doctor's offices planned. And then he's also going to have a special retailer that does like cheerleading outfits and things like that. And, you know, custom orders on cheerleading clothes. So, yep, that's South Main Street Plaza. This is probably the seventh, or I think it's the seventh rezoning in the primary corridor. So something that we were talking about earlier was, you know, yes, it would be great to have all those old office warehouse spaces, such as the Bots property, converted to commercial retail spaces, similarly to the site at North Shepherd. So that place in Houston is called MKT. It is a site where they had 5 office warehouse buildings that were converted to retail spaces. So they have different restaurants there. They have a ramen restaurant. They have a brunch place. I know they're opening an ice cream place there soon, but they also have a yoga studio, a Ray-Ban store, a CBD store, you know, very unique shops. But something important to highlight, that what's nearby these places in order to make them successful. well, it's in the Heights, firstly, where there's a lot of residential population, and also it happens to be right next to the Buffalo Bayou Trail. So there's a lot of amenities there that make it ideal for that type of redevelopment. Yes, we'd probably want that type of space here in Stafford. Like, I think that was what the vision was, but as Scott, wanted to point out, is that of the 9 rezonings we've had, 7 of them have been in the primary corridor. And for what? For mostly industrial distribution uses. So while we had this vision of what we wanted in these corridors, what is the market calling for? Well, right now in Stafford, it's calling for the major industrial sites, such as what we're seeing at Weatherford Farm, what we're seeing right across the street at what's known as Stafford Crossing and Kirkwood Industrial. That is some of the major development that's happened here in Stafford, is to allow for distribution more than any other sort of development that we've seen.
So just like in Stafford, when you're next to the excuse me, Carolyn. Just like in Stafford, when you're next to the Highway 90 trail and the Highway 59 trail, who all wants to come visit here?
Right.
Office Warehouse.
Yeah.
Why? Because their 18-wheelers and their big trucks run great up and down our local city streets.
Yeah. So on our right, we are about to pass what's called Regal Ranch.
I think we'll pull in.
Okay, cool. So Regal Ranch was typically, or traditionally, an events center, right? Right, so this is about, I think it's about 40 acres. So what's really interesting about this site is that the front is zoned primary corridor, the back end is zoned single family residential. So what that could mean is a great opportunity for a mixed use site. So having that retail commercial on the front and then residential in the back. But anyways, this is also a location that's currently mostly vacant, that is primed for development. But the question is, how do we encourage that development? In terms of detention, Fort Bend County Drainage District does own some of the land that's back there in order to accommodate future detention
Would y'all like to
requirements.
go in and make a look? I have the key. I have the pass to the door.
Sure.
Yeah, let's do it.
I would really like to.
Okay, cool.
So,
Don't miss.
is this for sale? Who owns the
No,
property?
so it is currently owned by a group called BAPS. They own this property. So what their intention is with it, I don't quite know. I have seen different plans for this area. Were very similar. They wanted to do retail at the front and then residential at the back. But it would probably require some sort of planned development district as well here, just to allow for more dense development for the single family uses that they wanted.
Well, I thought that at one time the city could possibly buy it.
Yeah, and it's definitely possible for the city to buy property up. And so essentially what a lot of cities have done when it comes to redevelopment opportunities is, if they see under, areas that they know needs redevelopment, so older neighborhoods, vacant property, things like that, what they can do is buy up property and then do what's called an RFP, so a request for proposals, to then see what developers, can do with that property, and then they sell it. So essentially what the city is responsible in doing is buying the property, platting the property, so for example creating new lots, so consolidating. The city can go ahead and consolidate property to then help for redevelopment. So
Is that
yes,
possible in the island as well?
yes, that's definitely possible in the island. So it would just be for, when property comes up for sale, for the city to buy it. and then, wait until they've bought enough, so then they're able to consolidate, replat into a single lot, and then either sell it to a developer or essentially request an RFP. So have proposals come in to see what people can come up with a space, and then based on the one they like, they can go about it like that. So, Regal Ranch, right next to one of our mobile home parks.
Otherwise known as Fountainhead Motorhome Villa.
I didn't even know this was back here.
This property, this ground to your right is Fort Bend County.
So what they would do essentially is build a detention pond here, because this backs up to Stafford Run. Stafford Run has plenty of capacity, but with development such as this one, it might necessitate that the development itself holds some water, so some of its water.
Not been out here when they had events.
Yeah.
And what houses are those right over there?
That is the promenade.
Colony Lake Estates.
Oh, Colony Lake Estates. My bad.
Colony
Promenade
Lake
is up
Estates
there.
this way. Promenade is that way.
I apologize.
Colony Lake Estates wraps up. It's okay. You ain't been here that long. And that property back there is also owned by Fort Bend County.
Right, but I believe they'd be willing to sell that portion because of the fact that Stafford Run does have a lot of capacity that they would be willing to sell. So, yeah, but that's the question, what strategies do we need to use to start redeveloping? And I think that's probably something that was missing from the comprehensive plan is, what strategies are we going to adopt and where are we going to focus our attention? Okay, so we are at what I like to call Popeyes, because really this is the only development that's here. So this was done in 2017. This development and the development across from Promenade Boulevard, this originally, I think it was, there was a lot of steps in order for this development to happen. So really, this is a good example of what was the intention for the primary corridor, which was for, this was a golf course in the past, right, Scott?
This was a vacant piece of property.
Okay, this
was vacant. This was vacant.
This was vacant. So of course, not bringing in any retail sales tax. So the idea was to develop it for retail. But as you can see, this particular retail space, apart from the Popeyes, is vacant. It has been vacant since 2017. So, since it's been completed. So there's a lot of questions that come up. Why? Really? But, I think really rather than the questions, it's the reasons. Is the tenant or the owner asking for way too much out of the prospective tenants? Or really, is no one interested in this space for multiple reasons? Is it the location? Is it, the fact that retail spaces are no longer needed? I think that's one of the questions that we have to ask as well. Are traditional retail spaces no longer needed? Now, across the street, they've been more successful in developing it, but a lot of eateries, but no what you would think of as typical retail. You got a Shipley's, a Jersey Mike's, which may or may not be closed.
Really?
Yeah.
Tatyana, is there a difference between retail sales, or how we look at retail sales, and how we look at restaurants?
Nope. Sales tax includes retail and restaurants. We don't distinguish between the two. At least at least that's how I've always thought about it. So really, the other side has been more successful, but it's only food. It is only food.
You want to hit this one too, or no?
Yeah, we can go ahead and drive in it, but yeah, the Jersey Mike has a sign on saying that they're closed for renovations.
Really?
Yep.
They just opened.
But yeah, so I think also what we can highlight here for all the spaces that have opened are all quick serve and fast food. So what does that mean? It's essentially people are not stopping here to eat. They're going through the drive-through and grabbing what they need to go on their way.
Which is what a gas station would be.
Yeah.
And actually you would linger a little longer to buy something.
So in theory, and I think that's why there's been a lot of gas stations here in Stafford. We have a total of 21, I believe, that's including the new ones being built. But yeah, all of these places really aren't really sit-down places. You know, they're more, you know.
They're serving what? They're serving Highway 90, and they're serving that flow of traffic right there.
Right. So, you know, if at the end of the day the goal is just for that, for people to buy and go, then these places are working okay.
It was funny. The owner of the Shipley's up here the other day, she told me when I stopped in, she goes, it's very slow. We thought it would be busier. I walked in there this morning to buy a donut, and the line of people was crazy.
Oh, really?
And just like I told her, I said, you just got to wait for them to find you. And as soon as they find you, they'll come.
Yeah.
And it's here.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just the convenient drive-through.
You're driving to work and you've got an opportunity to stop, get your donut, get your coffee,
and
grab you a sandwich,
road.
and hit the road. And that's exactly what these places do. They service that.
So,
but we wanted Stafford to be a destination, not just a pass-through.
Right. And I think hopefully the grid will become that. Yeah,
the grid will be a destination, but I mean, realistically, what is 90 for? 90 is to get you to downtown, and 90 is to get you out to 59. So
it's a
It's a pass-through road. You have to make it interesting and make people want to stop. And I think the only people that you're going to get in here as far as investors are somebody who thinks that they can make their return on their investment quick. I think the idea of having a place to sit down or a gathering location is great, but I think that's going to take a different type of investor. I think that's going to take somebody who has a long-range idea, and you're going to have to get, how many properties is it on the island that we have?
There's 63 different parcels.
63 different parcels. So you're going to have to come up with a way to get those parcels together in a big enough piece so you can do something that will draw a crowd. And there have been some discussions on how to get that done. But I just don't see the everyday investor coming in and doing that, because it's evident with what we have here now, the investors that are investing in our area are trying to turn the quick dollar. And if we're going to slow it down, we're going to have to find a different way. If we're going to change that type of development, we're going to have to find another way of doing it. We're going to have to find a different type of investor who wants to invest a different way. Mm-hmm. And it may be us that has to do the investing. The city.
Are we going to talk about the island at all, or is that part of this
We're going to beat
discussion?
that drum to death, but we can take some pictures of it.
Yeah, no, we can for sure talk about the island. I mean, the issue is stopping on the island. That's really the tricky part.
I'll tell you what. How about we pull up in front of Stafford Ice House?
Okay.
And then right there.
Mm-hmm.
The building was in disrepair. It was deemed substandard by our building official. We visited with Jack in the Box, and they agreed, and they took the building down. So it's for sale right now.
Yeah, so we're currently standing also on a feeder road. So this is something that was done by Public Works many years ago when, the 90 widened. So essentially it's to allow for some separation between the people that are just on 90 to get to downtown Houston, or conversely to the other side, that for people here in Stafford, they could actually come onto these feeder roads and conduct their business here in Stafford. So this is ours. Once you pass those medians, that is TxDOT. So this is the start of the island. Got 90 on both sides. It starts pretty narrow. It gets a little wider once you get to City Hall, and then it gets thinner. It has its own zoning district. The intent for this zoning district was to allow for mixed uses, but also, most importantly, mixed uses up, vertical. So the idea would maybe to have a central parking garage, so then you could walk around to the different uses. Have more like things like cafes or small scale restaurants where you could stop in, rather than you're in and out that you currently have, like your fast food places. So, but as you can tell, there's a lot of noise right now. So, would that type of ambiance be, okay here? That's another question to ask. But yeah, this is one of the few vacant lots, vacant on the island, because there was a substandard structure that got taken down. So, yep.
Do they still own it?
No, I believe it was a franchisee, and but no, they no longer own it. So,
But it's for sale.
yeah.
Anything else you want to say about the island?
No, at this point, not right now. I think we've discussed a lot of things that we wanted to with the island at the meetings. It's, for example, this piece of property is quite, it's quite small. There's, just on this corner, there's 3 separate owners. That's all within eyesight.
And all of these parcels are all kind of weird shaped, and different people own them. And
Yeah. Some of them, like this one, this is probably the only real square one that we have. And on top of that, it has the frontage on both ends. So it has South Main frontage and North Main frontage. A lot of these properties don't. You got a different owner on North Main versus South Main. And then on top of that, as you go further down on the island, you have city-owned streets, such as Katy and things like that. And so then you also have that street dividing the island in certain parts. So, and then you have all the cross streets, A through, I want to say G. I could be wrong on that. It's an interesting puzzle piece. Some of these uses are permitted by right. So I believe the antique store is permitted, the Church's Chicken is permitted. At one point in time, we wanted to discourage drive-throughs on the island. But with the 2017 change in the zoning ordinance, they're now allowed again. So I don't quite know if that was purposeful, not purposeful. And so that's a question we need to re-ask. Do we want drive-thrus on the island? Do we want people to be able to stop by, get their food, and leave? Similar as to what we saw in the primary corridor. Do we want those types of uses here? Or do we want to encourage people to stop in and shop, similar to this antique store here? Ideally, someone would stop in and shop, and we would get the sales tax off of it. Or do we want, like churches where someone can drive through, get their food, and leave? So, that's really the question. What kind of uses do we want here, and how are we going to get them to come?
That guy just had to do a 3-point turnaround to get around us.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the thought of this feeder road was great. It's the idea that someone can pull in here and drive at a different pace than what they're doing on 90, you know? So I think when Public Works came in and did this, you know, they had foresight about, you know, what the island could potentially be. But the question is, you know, how do you park in here? Because I mean, right now, with the size of the properties, the parking lot is going to take up a decent amount of the viable site, you know? So it's like, do we allow on-street parking? You know,
well,
so...
And a lot of times the parking lot is what's so unsightly.
Exactly. So, you know, the challenge is the fact that you have street on both sides. So ideally, in a lot of new designs, what you encourage is for the building to be up front, parking in the back. Well, if you're parking in the back, you're still facing that road.
Right.
So, you know, how do you do that? Do you contend with buildings facing both fronts and then a central parking on the inside? You know, could that be done? Or, you know, angled buildings, or, you know, I think there's a lot of creative opportunities. It's just finding someone who is interested in taking on those, you know, creative challenges. Yeah.
Parking garages with, you know, retail fronts or something.
Yeah, and
They've got a lot of those
yeah.
in Midtown.
Right, you know, so a parking garage could potentially work, but right now the zoning ordinance says that parking garages aren't allowed in the island. So, you know, that was something that I know was not the intent, but how did that end up like that, you know? And then it takes a lot to make those changes happen. You know, similarly with drive-thrus. Originally, I thought drive-thrus were not allowed in the island, but my zoning ordinance says they are. So, you know, we're just gonna have to figure out what we want to see here and how we're gonna get it accomplished.